Good morning. If you haven't met, I'm Matt. Welcome here. So a number of years ago, I was driving my car. It was this really junky Dodge Neon. If anyone's ever driven a Dodge Neon, you'll know that they're okay in the beginning, and then it goes downhill really fast. I don't know when the turning point on those cars are. It's something like 5 months in or something. No, it just started like not doing so well, and I was on my way to work, and all of a sudden, I could rev the car a lot, but there was no power going to the wheels. So I was like, vroom, and just like wasn't moving. So I pulled over the side of the road and I put it in park, turned it off, and then, I don't know much about cars, so my heart now is like pounding. I'm like, oh no, please no car trouble. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. Started the car up again, put it into drive, and just slowly started touching the gas pedal, and it kind of started moving a little bit, but I recognized, I tried a number of times, and I kind of realized that when I hit around 15 kilometers an hour, maybe 20, it would just, like, all power to the wheels would be lost. But I was still revving it, and I couldn't figure it out, but in my limited knowledge, I thought maybe it's something to do with the transmission. I'm mindful that I'm telling a couple car stories when we have mechanics in the room, so I just want to say right out that I know nothing about cars. Let's just make that straight, okay? Tim, stop judging me with your eyes. I can tell. Okay, so anyways, I got the car towed to my friend who runs this little garage in Mississauga in Port Credit, and he's like, yeah, it's totally your transmission, it's blowing. And then he said, it's not worth fixing this car. It's not worth fixing this transmission because this car is just so terrible. And then I was like, oh man. So, if you've ever had car trouble and you're never expecting car trouble, but it kind of hit me and I was super bummed. And I ran into one of my friends and he said, oh, that's too bad. I have an old car that's not on the road right now. It's just parked at my house. But if you want to come and if you can get it going, safety certified, I'll just give it to you. And I was like, oh man, that sounded like good news to my ears. So I went to his place and was able to get the car started and took it back to this friend who owns this garage, and he got it safety and certified for like next to no money, and it was amazing. And this is the car that he gave me. It was a 1987 BMW 535 IS, which some people, like car people, know this car and think it's awesome. I just thought, oh, it's a BMW, check, heard of that, and it was old, and it was running, and it was free. I was like, that is a score on all levels. And sometimes I'd be out driving this car, and people would stop me who would know the car, like if you bumped into someone in the parking lot, and they'd be like, oh, and they'd start talking about specs about the car, because I guess there's something about this engine that is like BMW enthusiasts know all about it. So I would just kind of nod my head and play along, just making people think that I had it because I was like really into cars. Anyways, I drove this car for about 2 years, and it was perfect. It was amazing. I never had to put any money into it. You had to live with some quirks. Like every now and then, you couldn't get the windows down, so you'd be at the drive-thru, and you had to be that guy who gets out of his car to like speak into the speaker, and then to pay, and then to get it. So like 3 times you're in and out of your car, which is a little embarrassing, but that didn't bother me. It was a free car, and sometimes the passenger door would not open, so everyone had to kind of shuffle in through one door. Anyways, it didn't matter. It was a car, it was working, but then something happened. The fan and the heater stopped working. So in the summer, obviously, who cares? You don't need heat or anything, but into the fall and on days like this, as it got colder, I'm like, oh man, I gotta figure something out. And so what I realized is, as I got the car warmed up enough, if I was driving and the engine was warm, there was just enough air coming through the car that it would like defrost the windshield. So as long as it was warmed up and I was moving, it was kind of okay. But that obviously, like, you kind of run out of luck really fast on really cold days because you can't warm up the car fast enough, and you can't be driving to get it defrosted when you can't see out. So then I started thinking, I gotta figure something out. So some of you have heard this story before. So what I did, though, is I went to Canadian Tire and I bought one of these eliminators. So you guys know this? It's one of those things where you plug into the cigarette lighter and then it gives you a regular like receptacle plug. So I'm like, in my mind, I'm formulating this plan. I know nothing about cars, but I'm gonna be creative and I'm gonna fix this thing. So I buy this eliminator and I plug it into the cigarette outlet. And then I went to Walmart and I bought a hair blow dryer. Because I thought, this is like so MacGyver. This is so awesome. So I'm gonna plug this in, and then I'm gonna use the blow dryer to like defrost the window, and I'm gonna drive this car for another 15 years. It's gonna be amazing. And I tried a number of times, and I couldn't figure out, the blow dryer would not start. And then I talked to another few friends, and they're like, of course not. Like, the amount of power the dryer requires, you can never draw off of this. It will never work. And they're like making fun of me. So then I'm thinking, oh, I have to figure this out. And then I'm like, well, What if it's possible to somehow hardwire it into the battery? Like just completely ignore the cigarette lighter, eliminate the eliminator, but go straight into the car battery. And then I thought, well, if I'm gonna do something like that, then forget the blow dryer. I need something that's gonna warm up the car and defrost. And so I went back to Canadian Tire and I bought a ceramic heater, one of these guys, because I thought if I put that on the console in the center, it will warm, Tim, stop judging. It will warm up the car, it will defrost the windows, I'll totally be set. This is the best thing ever. So again, I don't know what I'm doing, but I think if I can somehow get into the battery, in my mind, I was thinking I'll cut off the plug part on that and I'll somehow wrap it around. Again, I don't know if this is gonna work, but I was thinking this is like the solution. So it's freezing cold outside. I'm on my hands and knees at the driver's side door, under the steering wheel, and I'm pulling back all the carpet, and I'm trying to figure out how do you get from the passenger compartment into the engine compartment. There has to be a way to get through like the firewall or whatever it's called that separates the two things. I'm like, I gotta be able to get through here. And I'm poking around trying to figure out, do I drill a hole through? What am I gonna do? Like, I can't drive this car, it's freezing cold, I can't see anything. And then I see this like little box right under the steering wheel, and it dawns on me, and I'm like, I think that's the fuse panel or fuse box. I don't know what, it's a fuse panel in your house. I don't know what it's called in a car. Fuse box. I'm like, I wonder if it's just a fuse. Could it be? So I get out the manual, and I start looking around, and I try to figure out which fuse would operate the heater and the fan for the defrost motor. And I find where I think it goes in the little fuse box. So I go back to Canadian Tire again, and I try to find, I'm like, I think I need this kind of a fuse. I could buy a whole box of them, like a whole packet of them for like $1.49. So I'm like, I got lots to try. If it doesn't work, I'll just start swapping a whole bunch out. So I take them back to the parking lot. I kind of open up that little fuse box cover, and I put the new one in. And then you have that moment where like you're excited to turn the key, but you're really nervous to turn the key, because at this point, like, who knows what's going to happen? So I'm sitting in the driver's seat, I'm kind of praying like, oh man, if this works, I am a genius at fixing cars. I fire up the car, and it just all starts working. The fan is humming. After the car warms up, the heat is blowing. It's getting so hot, I can take off my mitts and my toque and my scarf and my shirt, and I'm just driving around like I own it. It's so good. And I realized, oh my gosh, it was this one little fuse that's all I had to do. I was going through all these steps trying to figure it out, and it was this one little fuse that was not in the right place at the right time to make it all work. And if you need some car help or fixes, let me know, because I'm really good at those things. We'll definitely have fun figuring it out. I probably won't be able to do it. But anyways, that was my experience with this car, and all of a sudden this one fuse changed and fixed it all. There's this one connection point that was missing. I tell you that whole story because I think there's some parallels we can draw in our desire to be in relationship, to keep company with Jesus, that happens when we try to substitute all kinds of things that are pseudo kind of fixes and replace it for the thing that ultimately is the right fix. So we can do those things like I did in the beginning, where you actually don't do anything. You just kind of let the car warm up, and you hope that enough wind is blowing by that it kind of warms up, kind of defrosts the windshield, and you kind of get by. It's the I'm not really going to do anything, I'm just going to wait and see what happens kind of mentality. Or there's the addition subtractions. I'm going to add that into the mix. I'm going to take this away. I'm going to try that. I'm going to not do that. And all these kinds of like Band-Aid kind of solutions. We have this sense like maybe there's something more to discover in our spiritual journey with Jesus. So I'm going to try this, try that, try this, try this. And it's kind of just putting little Band-Aids on without really getting to the root of the problem. But then the fuse, that one little fuse, a whole package of them from $1.49, it goes in the right place, the right connection happens, and all of a sudden everything springs to life. And the passage we're going to look at today from John chapter 15 gives us this picture and paints this picture of that everything we're looking for, this whole idea of being rooted and established, of having vibrancy and life, all comes only in connection with Jesus. That no matter what we try, all the different things we add, take away, things we ignore, all those things are our own man-made attempts to try to address a longing or a yearning for something more that ultimately can't be satisfied until we connect in with Jesus in a deeper way. So grab your Bibles, John chapter 15. It's going to be on the screen. Flip open your app, whatever you need. And we're going to read this together. And we're going to talk about a few things about what it means to be in connection with Jesus. A.W. Tozer in his book, The Pursuit of God, he says this. He says, "It is a solemn thing and no small scandal in the kingdom to see God's children starving while actually seated at the Father's table." Man, you're pulling up a chair, the Father's table, the feast is before you, and yet you're just starving. I think that's kind of symptomatic of many people in the church, is they feel like they have a seat at the table, and yet their experience is one of longing, of starvation, of hunger, of everything seems to be kind of out there, and yet they know there's something missing. And so as we begin 2018, like we said last week, we're going to be working through this series on spiritual disciplines. And each week we're going to be looking at, starting next week, looking at different disciplines and learning from ancient patterns and rhythms and just exploring what could they mean for us. For some of you, we'll talk about one thing, say 1 week, and you'll be like, man, that's the thing I want to try and add into my rhythm with Jesus, and you'll just come alive in it. And it'll be like, that's the thing I've been looking for. And other people will be like, that's not my thing. Because we're all different. We're all connected in different ways. But they're all different mechanisms and methods, I guess, of trying to tune in and connect in with Jesus. And so just so you know, we're going to be looking at these kinds of things. So some of them, we're just kind of putting them into broad categories, are disciplines of engagement. This is in no way an exhaustive list at all. But disciplines of engagement such as like Bible study, prayer, and worship. Some disciplines of abstinence like fasting, solitude, silence, Sabbath. These are some of the things over the coming weeks and months we're going to be talking about. We also hope to have a few special guests come in and in an interview kind of format, just learn from them around, specifically around spiritual direction. What does it look like when someone is helping guide you and lead you and helping you become more aware of what's been missing? And so I have a friend who's a spiritual director. I'm hoping he can come in and join us and just learn about what it means to guide and to learn with each other. Anyways, that's the hope for where we're heading over the next while if you missed last week. I also mentioned that, as a new year, some people make New Year's resolutions. I kind of did one on behalf of our church, just because I felt like there's something significant for us to pay attention to this year. And so I shared this again. I shared this with the folks last week, but here's where I feel like a little bit of a resolution for our crew this year would be. So the New Year's resolution for Reunion would be, this year, we'll fall more in love with Jesus. We'll experience a deeper level of formation through surrender and obedience and move forward with humility, maturity, and wisdom, willing to sacrifice for the kingdom. This practice of disciplines and our goal, Klaus Isler says this in his book. He says, our goal is to place ourselves in accommodating circumstances, with our hearts open, asking for God's empowering grace, engaging formation practices supported by our Christian community so that over time, our worldview beliefs can change and become more aligned with God's reality. And so that's this whole conversation we're going to be having around disciplines, is what does it mean to keep company with Jesus in a whole new way? And I think we'll discover some really, really cool things together. So again, John chapter 15, here we go. I'll read it through. We'll talk about a few things. We'll get you guys talking together, and then we'll see where it goes. So here's Jesus speaking. He says, I'm the true vine, and my Father is the keeper of the vineyard. My Father examines every branch in me and cuts away those who do not bear fruit. He leaves those bearing fruit and carefully prunes them so that they will bear more fruit. Already you are clean because you have heard my voice. Abide in me and I will abide in you. A branch cannot bear fruit if it is disconnected from the vine, and neither will you if you are not connected to me. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you abide in me and I in you, you will bear great fruit. Without me, you accomplish nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is like a branch that is tossed out and shrivels up, and is later gathered to be tossed into the fire to burn. If you abide in me, my voice abides in you. Anything you ask will come to pass. Your abundant growth and your faithfulness as my followers will bring glory to the Father. I have loved you as the Father has loved me. Abide in my love. Follow my example in obeying the Father's commandments and receive his love. If you obey my commandments, you will stay in my love. I want you to know the delight I experience, to find ultimate satisfaction, which is why I'm telling you all this. So Jesus, right at the beginning, he grabs this really historic and well-known cultural symbol for the nation of Israel, this idea of being the vine, the vineyard. Through Old Testament scripture, the nation of Israel also often sees that this metaphor, this picture where they are the vineyard and God is the one who looks after the vineyard. So this Jesus grabs this image and he transforms it and uses it in a bit of a different way. So that idea of the vineyard is so rooted in their history. Even as you would enter the temple, as you'd come into the temple to offer sacrifices of worship at this point, right above the entrance in gold was this huge ornate golden vine with clusters of grapes. And it was pointing back to this covenant that God had established with his people, that you are my people and I'm tending the vineyard. I'm looking after you. There's a special relationship that happens. You're the chosen people of God. So this is this image, this metaphor that Jesus is using, and then he kind of transforms it though. Instead of saying, hey, nation of Israel, Jewish people, you are the vineyard, he's taking this back and he's saying, actually, I'm the vine. You're the branches. Instead of all of us having connection on our own just because of our national identity, actually, now for you to have connection with the Father, you have to come through me. Everything now comes through me. I am the vine. You're the branches. If you're going to have any kind of connection, it has to come through me. And so there's a number of places all through the Old Testament where the nation of Israel would understand their connection to God in one way, and Jesus shows up and says, he kind of reiterates it and transforms it into a new level of understanding. Everyone who wants to have connection has to now come through Jesus. So that's the first thing. He says, I am the vine. Then he goes into this conversation about fruit, that if you're connected in the vine, then you will bear fruit. And if you're not connected, you won't bear fruit. Everything comes through this life-giving connection with Jesus. And it talks about the Father going through the vineyard, kind of taking stock, taking vital signs, if you will, of everything that's happening and noticing the branches that are bearing fruit and those that aren't. Those that are, he wants to prune up so they become more healthy and strong so they can bear more fruit. And those that aren't, it's better for him to prune those off and get rid of them. So that whole idea of vital signs is fresh for me. So we had an experience over the Christmas holidays. I've told a few of you about this. We were skating at Arrowhead Provincial Park up near Huntsville, and they have that really cool outdoor skating loop. Has anyone ever been there? You guys skated there? Yeah, it's so cool. It's really, really cool. It's like, it feels nostalgic and very Christmassy. There's a little bit of an uphill and there's a little bit of a downhill, and if you're skating novice, it can feel a little bit treacherous at times. But anyways, it was a really fun thing. So we were up that way as a family, and we wanted to go skating. So I took this video of, it's Bobby and I skating on this trail. So I want to show you this first, and then I'll give you the rest of the story. So and for all you like photojournalists, I know I held the phone the wrong way. Joel Powley, I know I did it this way instead of this way, which I'm sure drives some of you crazy, but I'll learn. So anyways, here's us skating. We're just skating around through the forest. It's all magical. Bobby's cracking jokes. Everything's good at this point. And about 15 minutes later, we weren't even going fast. I was actually now a little bit ahead of Bobby because I'm a pretty good skater. And I'm not at all. But I happened to be a little bit ahead. And Bobby wasn't going fast or anything, and she just kind of slipped and fell and landed on her back. So Hadley was with her, our youngest daughter, and she's like, Dad, get back here. And that's a real moment as like a husband and a father where you have to try to discern, is this an emergency situation? Or it's like, she's probably going to be okay. And I erred on the wrong side. I'm like, it's no big deal. So I kind of just did the casual skate back. And then I realized, well, maybe something really happened here. And Bobby was cracking some jokes at first, and people were stopping, are you okay? And she's like, oh, I'm just lying here. I'm just icing my back. It's okay. Stuff like that. And then when we tried to get her to move, she's like, I can't sit up. I can't move. And so then you're like, okay, we'll just hang out there. So we're just kind of hanging out for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. People who had stopped once to say, are you okay, have now circled the loop in our back. And we're like, oh my gosh, we got to try to find some help. So we're trying to call the front gate. Anyways, long story short, we had to get an ambulance. We shut down the whole skating trail. So other families' hopes of skating that trail were dashed. Everyone got kicked off. They loaded Bobby onto like a backboard and took her to the Huntsville hospital and did x-rays to find out she had a hairline fracture in her L2 vertebrae or something. And it's not so bad that they have to really do anything. It's just the pain of it all and just to manage the pain. So they were giving her fentanyl, which has like been in the news a whole lot. And so we were asking the nurse, like, man, are you sure it's okay? All these fentanyl injections and stuff. And then they're like giving her morphine. And so they're trying to manage her pain. And then eventually we just had to help her up and get her home. And but the whole time they're doing that, they're assessing her vital signs. So they have her finger in this little doohickey. I don't know what it's called. Like a clamp. Claire, you know, the clamp that is, I guess, doing blood pressure or heart rate or something, and it's just beeping. And then when they had her on the bed, they're asking her to like move her feet up and can you push your feet down? And they're just trying to assess and take all the vital signs and trying to get a sense of her health and where she's at so they can diagnose what's working, what's not working, and what the problem actually is. That kind of thing jumped to mind immediately as I'm thinking about the Father taking stock of the vineyard and assessing the health of the branches. And those that aren't doing well, he removes for the sake of the whole. And those that are producing fruit, he prunes so that they become more healthy. But the Father is the one who's tending the vineyard, and Jesus is the vine, and we're the branches connected in. And fruit then is a sign of this connection with Jesus. That as we're in Jesus, this connection and this life-bearing fruit happens. That fruit is the byproduct of connecting with Jesus. So if we're keeping company with Jesus, fruit then is the result. And then this third thing that jumps out to me, this idea of remaining or abiding, depending which translation you read. The root Greek word there for abide or for remain means make this your destination. So when Jesus says remain in me or abide in me, he's saying make me your destination. Like this is the place. This is where you've been shooting for, longing for, looking for. You have arrived. There's no need to look any further. There's no need to keep scouting. Remain in me, abide in me. This is the destination. Gary Burge in his commentary says, discipleship is not just a matter of acknowledging who Jesus is, but having Jesus connected to our spiritual lives, working in our inner lives to bring about transformation and life. That as Jesus is the source of this life, as we remain and abide in him, as we make Jesus our destination, that the life and the love and the attributes of Jesus begin to animate and transform and change us, and they become who we are. There's this transformation that happens as we're connected into the vine. So I just want to leave it there. Just wanted to give you those quick little things to get you thinking. And if you're new with us, we love to just turn this monologue into a bit of a conversation. And so we're going to invite you just to take a few minutes, maybe just quick 3 or 4 minutes to circle up together. If you're in a group talking and you recognize someone isn't talking with someone, invite them to join your group. If you hate this kind of stuff, you can grab coffee or whatever. But just take a few minutes to talk about anything that jumps out to you. And we want to listen and learn. You may have a question, but I think better yet, it's what jumps out to you, what's stirring, what stands out to you about this idea of connection with Jesus. And then we want to listen to each other. So I'll kind of facilitate a little bit of a sharing time. And then I have a few thoughts depending on what we're talking about to share as well. Okay, so turn, circle up, meet some people, invite people into your group, chat about John 15 there. Okay, go for it. Okay, I'm going to bring everyone back together. I know it's really short, but just circle back up and love just to invite anyone who wants to share something that you brought up, that someone in your group brought up, nominate someone to share, it doesn't matter. But if you're going to speak out, just if you want, stand up, but just at least speak loud enough that people can try to hear. So what were some of the things that were jumping out to you, standing, resonating, challenging? What were you guys talking about as you circled up? Shout it out. Jode. Ooh, standing, yes. It's a new year, the new you. Nice.
So, and we actually, I don't know, kind of had, I don't want to say solution, but we talked a good circle around this. But the idea of having that feeling of, if I'm not bearing fruit or if I'm feeling disconnected, have I been trimmed and thrown in the pile to be burned? Like, is God done with me? I think is kind of the, at least I've had discussions in the past about that. Like, is it too late? Because it sounds very final. Like you'll be cut off and thrown away. And so that was sort of our discussion. And I know one thing that Josh brought up that he's heard in the past is that even if you're asking that question, it kind of says you care and you want to connect with God, so that almost says you're still a part of the vine. But that was sort of where we were talking.
It's awesome. I think every moment, every day is an opportunity to respond and to make a choice. So in our discipleship, I don't think any part of discipleship is about, hey, I've made this choice or this decision and then it's set. I think it's an ongoing decision and choice that you have to make. So I think every opportunity, like you said, Josh, if you feel like, hey, just the awareness of that maybe there's something more or maybe that connection's not there, that awareness and that desire to say, hey, I want to reconnect and invite Jesus into these places to lead and to bring health back into those places that maybe have felt dead or dormant I think it's a beautiful opportunity. But I think that's the same way for all of us. It's an ongoing choice and decision to say yes to Jesus and to follow. And if you're in that place, if you feel like, oh, I'm dead, or is there any hope? I would say 100% there's hope. Having the conversation and saying yes to Jesus. Jesus is always sitting there waiting, eager to engage with you and bring life into those places with you. But we have the choice. That's the beauty, is that it's up to us. He's not going to force himself on you. He's not going to make things happen. But he's eagerly waiting and anticipating that if you say, Jesus, reveal yourself, I want to be connected, that source of life again begins to flow and bring transformation and hope. And that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Some other thoughts? What were you guys chatting about? Maddie?
Do I have to stand?
No, but it'd be awesome if you did.
Oh my goodness. Jody. Yeah.
Jody's starting a new rhythm here.
I had the thought that I work really hard to tend my own vineyard and manage the perceptions in the way that I come across to other people. But what I see here is this side of grace where the vine master wants to do that for me. But that requires me to be open and vulnerable and just show him my vine untended that I haven't worked really hard to keep, and just say like, hey, take those branches off, prune those vines, and that's really hard. I'm really bad at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can relate to that. Even before, when we were just kind of praying before the gathering started, we were making a joke. I don't know how we got onto it, but we were joking that we should do a teaching series at some point about how to be yourself, but be the Sunday version of yourself, which is like 60% your real self. Like we all kind of mask and put on these things. It's not really us, or we try to look after our own self, or rely on our own talents and strengths. Because to surrender it all just feels difficult. And we love the idea of we got this kind of feeling. But that's not what Jesus is calling us to. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's probably something we can all, or many of us, can relate to. Yeah, Heather.
Sometimes I find reading the Bible, like, we take things and oversimplify them. So when Jesus is saying, like, Israel is no longer the connector point, but I am the connector point, are we taking the metaphor too deep? Like, is it meant to be individual? Like, you're a branch, you're a branch, you're a branch? Or is it kind of like more of like overall symbols? Like, otherwise, I do agree that the idea of like cutting people off and burning them and it's deeply personal and intimate, and that's really aggressive for me.
Yeah, I think any metaphor breaks down, but I think it's both. So I think individually, we all have this invitation, this choice to say yes or follow Jesus and be connected to the vine. So that is a personal opportunity, invitation, and choice. But we know that when you say yes to following Jesus, part of that saying yes, as you continue to read and understand Scripture, is that you're saying yes to the community. You're saying yes to belong to something much bigger and greater than yourselves, which requires you to belong to this family, to this sense of mission and kingdom and people, this reconstituted family of God, this brand new meaning of what it looks like to belong to each other as we belong to and are connected to God. So I think it's both. So in that situation where it feels like, what if someone's gone? Our health should be, and our connection should be, to the point where if someone's missing or struggling or dying on the vine, if we're going to use the phrase, we should hopefully know that and be a part of the support and care and love for that person. I think it all works together at the same time, Heather, yeah. Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, maybe I'll add some thoughts for those that are struggling with some of Jesus' language. In the context, if you read the full Gospels, Israel was in a time where there's a certain amount of terrorism going on. It was quite a violent environment. So some of his stronger language isn't about judgment, it's about warning. In other words, if I'm your Messiah and I'm calling you to a life of peacemaking, love, reconciliation, if you don't stay with that, it's going to go bad, tragically bad. It's more of a warning. And in that context, it did go bad because they continued on that path. And then if you read the history books in 70 AD, Titus came in and just basically crucified the entire city of Jerusalem. Like they ran out of wood because of the amount of crucifixion. So sometimes we read it as if Jesus is being judgmental when he says stuff like, it's gonna go bad, really, really bad. It's not him. What he's saying is, if you don't embrace this life of love that I'm calling you to, it's gonna, this is a warning. Your Messiah is giving you a severe warning, which was out of a heart of love ultimately.
Yeah.
Because then he weeps over Jerusalem.
Yeah. That's great.
So anyways, just more
No,
thoughts.
that's awesome. And when we read the story of the people of Israel, it's like a story of, we've talked about this last time, right? A story of like just what doesn't work.
Right.
Over and over, we just see that in the story of Israel. We find our place in that. It just doesn't work until Jesus comes, and then this is what works. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's good. So let me just leave us with maybe a thought. So as I'm thinking about all this stuff, this idea of connection with the vine and life, with Jesus, keeping company with Jesus, this whole theme for the series we're starting, I think maybe it ties in a little bit with what you said, Matt, is that this idea of Jesus as the destination or the point we want, I think, at least for me, resonates most deeply, is that it's this idea of inness, being in Jesus, remaining in, abiding in, feels to me like the most difficult part of this idea, this section of what discipleship looks like. Because I feel like we often want to make it Jesus plus one or Jesus minus one. We want to say, yes, Jesus is what I'm looking for plus this, but not that part of what Jesus is saying. We want to add and subtract and take away, because ultimately I think there's this unrest and uneasiness with saying Jesus is the destination. It is the point. That the things we're ultimately looking for is only found in Jesus. Period. We want to think that there's something more that we do or work we have to accomplish or ways we have to measure up, rather than saying just abide in me, rest in me, be connected in me. I think that's one of the most challenging parts of this whole thing. When Paul is writing to the early church in his letter to the Philippians, there's 18 times he uses this phrase, in Christ or in the Lord, this idea of full identity in Jesus. He uses it 18 times in his shorter letter there, which feels like a really important theme that even he, as a kind of an apostle leader in the church, is trying to emphasize and highlight for people. He talks about our confidence being in Christ. We are saints in Christ. We're called heaven. We stand firm. We rejoice in him, hope in him, agree in him, glory in him, found in him. Our hearts and mind are guarded in him. We have our needs met in him. We welcome others in him. That everything that animates and gives life and identity to us as individuals and as a community is found in him. It's like this ongoing reminder to the early church. Mark Buchanan, in his book Spiritual Rhythm, says the reality of inness, of being in Christ and Christ being in us, is the essence of the loving, transforming relationship Jesus invites us to enjoy. This idea of being in Jesus. Tozer says again from Pursuit of God, he says, coming to Christ is not an end, but an inception. For now begins the glorious pursuit, the heart's happy exploration of the infinite riches of the Godhead. When we say yes and choose to follow Jesus, it's not the end. Sometimes we use the word destination and we think, Jesus is the destination, we've arrived, it's done. That's not the point in this. Destination means that's where it all really begins, where the true life and meaning and identity begin. Jesus is the source of that. Let me skip to this. Isler again says, Klaus Isler says, there is no silver bullet or quick pill available for us to become instantly mature living like Jesus. Putting Jesus' words into practice is a process that God enables and in which we have a significant role. So it's this dance. It's this dance of saying we can't do it ourselves. We need God to show up in order to do that work, but we still have to be active in the process. We have to choose to do it and to engage and to be active. It's this dance of we're bringing something to the party, but ultimately what we need to make the party what it is can only be supplied by God. Dallas Willard says, the enemy in our time is not human capacity or overactivism, but the enemy is passivity. The idea that God has done everything and you're essentially left to be a consumer of the grace of God, and that the only thing you have to do is find out how to do that and to do it regularly. I think this is a terrible mistake. Grace is not the opposite of effort, but the opposite of earning. So I want to give you a few minutes to think, and I know we didn't today jump into any specific practice or discipline. We're starting that next week. But I want to talk about this idea of life and abiding and remaining because it kind of sets the whole thing up. That as we check out these practices, as we learn from them, we try some things, we experiment, all these things are just tools to try to figure out what it means to keep company with Jesus in a different way. And so when I think about next steps, and we're going to give you a moment just to be quiet, it can be really easy just to shut things down in these conversations over the coming months. It could be really easy to say, whatever, I'm not really into that. But can I just encourage you to approach this season with a fresh, I'm losing my word, like a renewed sense of hope and optimism and expectancy and a desire to say, hey, let's be open and honest and transparent. Let's see what God will do. Let's just be open in this whole process. And can I also say that this journey is not about doing it on your own. It's about doing it in community. And so we talk often about our midweek groups. And I know we only have 3 going right now. They're all on Tuesday nights. Maybe that does not work for you. We're hoping to start some more. But if Tuesday is available, can I just encourage you to get involved in a group where you can be having these conversations together. And so if you've never been to a midweek group, it's basically you have dinner and then you have some guided conversation. So it's like a big potluck or something, and you just eat around the table, and then you talk about some of the themes that come out from Sunday, themes of life. You just hang out, talk about it, and rely on each other to listen and to reveal new things and to become aware of your blind spots. And so jump into one of those things. But I guess my heart is to say, I think there's something in this conversation for us as a community, as we work through these exercises and these disciplines, there's something in it for us to pay attention to and be open and optimistic for. And to be expectant, to invite God into those places, and to, if we really believe he's the source of life, then invite him to infuse us with a new sense of life and hope and love in a way we have maybe previously not experienced, or maybe it's been a long time and we feel like we've been drying up on the vine. So I want to give you a minute just to reflect and be quiet. Drew and crew are going to come and lead us. And I'll pray, and then we're going to, as we're singing, we're going to move into communion. And at any point, there'll be a couple communion servers. I think Tim and Maddie are coming, and you can just rip off a piece of bread, dip in the juice. And we do this as an ongoing reminder of our life and identity through Jesus' death and resurrection. And the bread symbolizes Jesus' broken body, and the juice, it's just grape juice, symbolizes his shed blood. And as he lays down his life for us, as he lovingly gives himself, he invites us to remain and to abide and to have a place in this transforming, amazing kingdom that he's established. And that is our identity as family together. So just take a minute to be quiet, and then I'll pray, and then we'll sing together. Jesus, you're the vine and we are the branches. Life comes through connection with you. And so as we have this conversation, as we continue it around tables this week, as we work through this exploration of spiritual disciplines and practices, I guess with expectation and hope, Jesus, we ask that you'll lead and teach us and open us and expose us to new things, and you'll stretch us, and that you use this conversation to help us to come to life in brand new ways, that you give us a new imagination and a sense of dreaming and longing for more. And while we do our part and we bring our part, we know that the source of all those things can only be met and realized in relationship with you. So Jesus, thank you for the hope we have in you. Thank you for your death and resurrection. Thank you that we call each other sister and brother, that we discover what it means to be spiritual family together, that we can be vulnerable and honest about things that we feel like are going pretty well, and we can also be honest and vulnerable about the things that we just are struggling with. And in the context of vulnerability and safety, you help us to listen, to see each other, to have a place in this family, and to invite others around the table. Jesus, as you are the head and the one who invites us to the banquet. So we sing and worship. Thank you, God. Amen.